So hi, this is leadership skills for the new manager. Um, Let me give you a quick intro. My name is Eryn. Please use she, her pronouns for me. Um, I am the director of engineering at Cloudburst, a startup studio with an emphasis on underestimated founders. We are based in Northeast, and yeah, it's a pretty sweet place to work. I've been in the industry for 12 years, give or take. Yeah, something like that. I've led some people in my day. Before I was a director, I was a manager. Before I was a manager, I was a technical lead. Before I was a technical lead, I was an individual contributor, which is the fancy management way to say, I said I wasn't looking at the chat and I did, and I regret it, which is the fancy management way to say people who aren't managers. I also tweet some things. You'll see my Twitter handle at the bottom of most of the slides, not all of the slides, but most of them. So if you want to tweet at me, please do. Like Maria mentioned, this started as a 4-hour workshop. I was going to give it at a conference in Nashville. That conference has, of course, been canceled. So I had also submitted it to Minibar and said that I was going to do it as a 45-minute talk. And then Minibar got canceled. And now we're having this. So I have 20 minutes to give you what started as 4 hours of content. The way I'm going to do that is by cutting out a lot of the more tactical things and hopefully making this a little bit, just like a little more broad so that even if you're not a manager, you can learn some stuff. So let's do this. The number one thing that I get asked when I work with new managers or I ask them what their big challenges are is, what is my job? So most of us got into management, if we were in tech, by being really good at the thing we did before we were managers, which I'm just going to assume for a lot of us is development, because that's what it was for me. As a developer, success is really obvious. Your tickets are closed, you're squashing bugs, you're shipping features, you're not making too many new bugs, your tests are running, you have constant small bits of progress to measure. And you're always getting this feeling that, like, obviously something has been done that is correct and excellent. The problem is that as a manager, we don't get those things. So what does success look like for a manager? Yeah, basically that. It's not obvious anymore how we measure ourselves. The metrics, the easily countable things are gone. The job of being a manager is just so much more amorphous and less defined. I'm going to use this talk to hopefully make it a little bit more clear what some of those things can be. So the success to be successful as a manager, your goal is to have a healthy, happy, and high functioning team. You no longer get to measure success solely by the work that you put out. That's what's so challenging about being a new manager, is that you go from a world where you more or less relied on your own success to be the yardstick to a place where you have 2 to 8 to 10 people who now are determining whether or not you're doing well at your job. So the way that we can succeed as managers is to foster that happy, healthy, high functioning team by being a leader. There's an obvious next thought from that, which is, wow, nice non-answer. And I know, stay with me. So we want to foster this team by being a leader. This is where we're going to use our skills that are coming out of this talk and that we bring from all different parts of life into this job. That's what's kind of nice about management, is that no, you don't necessarily get to use the exact same skills that you used every day in your job, but you do get to bring things in from the rest of your life. If you're a parent, if you have been volunteering on a board somewhere, if you've coached soccer for kids, if you've done any other thing where you've done something leadership-y, that is management material. So the trick is to figure out what parts we can pull out of that, clean them up a little bit for the workplace, and then use them to be successful when helping other people. So you've heard the phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. A leader is the person who makes that true. So if you think about a circle, and it's got all of these little circles inside of it. So you've got Sam and Clara and Raj and Bob and all of these different people who are bringing their skills to the table. If you try to put them all right next to each other, you're going to have space in between those circles. In order to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts, the leader needs to be fill that space in between the circles. The leader needs to be the glue of the team that helps everybody achieve more. I like to think of a leader as being a multiplier. So you aren't necessarily outputting the exact end work of the team, but the fact that you're there is making the team more productive and more effective than they could have been. So let's talk about a few leadership skills that are going to help us make that a reality. So the first one is empathy. Keisha's talk actually touched on a lot of this stuff, and I think it's great because it applies whether you are an individual contributor working with one other person on a pairing on a program, or it matters if you are all the way up to the CEO. You can't, I think, lead a group of people effectively if you do not have empathy for where the people in that group are at. So the first step to this is to see your team as individuals. It's really tempting to assume that we know what motivates other people by assuming that it's the same thing that motivates us. And that is never true. You are the star of your own story, but everybody else is the star of theirs. And just like characters in a movie, they're fully fleshed out as though they were the protagonist, as though they were the main character. So what we have to do is go in and figure out what makes each person on our team tick. I like to ask a few specific questions, not to them, but to guide my own thinking. What motivates them? What crushes their spirit? What's their work style and what are their goals? If you figure out what motivates the people on your team, you're going to have a bajillion times more luck guiding them towards the direction you want them to go to. Also, if you understand what crushes their spirit, you're going to have longer retention with the people on your team. You need to make sure that you are aware of the things that make people shut down, that make people no longer want to contribute to the group. So one example is I had two people who reported to me. One of them, really what motivated him was just helping people. He just wanted to help the people around him. That was what made him happy. And when he couldn't do that, that made him not enjoy his job as much. Another person, equal sort of like skill level hierarchy in the company, what motivated him was to sorry, I looked at the chat again. I said I wouldn't, but I can't figure out how to hide it. What motivated him was to just do the best work he could. Like he just wanted to write beautiful, beautiful code that made other developers' lives better, but not necessarily clients and end users and coworkers outside of that development scope. Those are both fine things. But you can see that if I tried to have the two of them work on the same thing, I would very quickly have one of them get burnt out. And I would end up losing that person because they wouldn't be motivated. Similarly, I have to know that what's going to crush them is if the first person doesn't hear that people love the work that he's contributing, or if the second person is told that his ideas don't have a place in the company. So you want to figure out what motivates your people. You also want to know their work style so that you aren't accidentally just chafing with people by the way that you're trying to get your work done. And finally, you want to understand people's goals, the goals that they bring to the company and the goals that they have for their own career. So the goals that people have for their careers, I think sometimes they get nervous to bring them up to us as managers because they're afraid that when we hear that they want to do something that maybe is not what they're doing right now, they're going to get in trouble or get fired or something. And that is a huge tragedy because if somebody starts thinking that way, they're a flight risk. They're gone soon. So what you want to do instead is work with people. The way I think about it is I want to understand what they want and I want to understand what the company wants. And then I want to figure out how we can overlap those things and continue to check back in because you want to make sure that what people want out of their job is at least to some degree what they're getting. And if it can't be, you want to address that as quickly as you can and not waste anyone's time. So don't assume that people are motivated the same way you are. You need to understand what makes them tick. Tons of research has shown that diverse teams produce better work. And if you are expecting that people work the way that you do, eventually it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The diverse people who do not exactly think or act or get motivated by the same things you do, they're going to leave your team. And you're going to end up with a team full of very homogenous workers. We want to cut that off before it happens by addressing the people we work with as individuals from day one. Leadership skill number 2, setting clear expectations. One of the most important things that you can do is make it clear what you need from people. As a manager, this is, in some ways, your only job is to figure out what has to come, what requests are coming in, and how you're going to sort them out and send them back out. You're almost like a router or like a mailroom or something. You get kind of uncertain input. People aren't really sure what they need. They'll put it out there. Your fellow managers or the people above you or whatever. Your job is to take that information, distill it down into something actionable, and then make it very clear to the people who can deliver on that for you what it is you need from them. So this takes a lot of forms in a company and in a job. I'm going to quickly touch on a few because quickly is all we have time for today. So first, performance expectations. People should have a clear sense of what it means to do a good job at the company and on the team. To the degree that you can, measurable metrics are fantastic. There are a lot. I mean, this is a whole talk in and of itself to talk about how to measure performance and ways that are more and less equitable and the pros and the cons. But the bottom line is, however you do it, I really encourage you to at least sit down and think about what you would want from people and what is going to dictate a good job versus a bad job. Second, as developers, code quality expectations. This is something that's very easy, I think, for us to just let go because, again, we sort of assume that everybody approaches code the same way we do. And there's kind of this thought that we don't want to get into the fight of like coding standards or, this formatting versus that formatting. And I get that that can sound like a pretty frustrating holy war, depending on the group that you're working with. But again, there's a whole talk here about why that's a good idea. With our limited time, I'm just going to say you should take my word for it. That having some kind of understanding of what code quality means to your team is going to produce far better work with much less conflict. So that can look like expectations about test coverage. It can look like linting and making sure that you're all using the same formatting in your code. It can look like decisions about or discussions about how we decide when to do the best solution versus when to do the solution that gets the job done. But at the bottom line is we want to get this figured out for whatever is true for your team. Because even if you know very clearly what you want, it's not going to be the case for every team or every project. So you got to figure that out. Third, intrapersonal expectations. If we are only looking at the code or the work that our people produce as measures of success or failure, we are missing a huge portion of the puzzle. And that is the way that the people on the team interact with each other. I'm going to skip right to the next bullet because working agreements can be a really nice tool for this. But as somebody who's in charge of the team, you have a huge impact on setting the tone and showing acceptable ways to interact with each other. And you have a lot of responsibility to call out when people are interacting in not acceptable ways, because allowing something to happen is a tacit agreement that it will that is how we work here. So if someone does something terrible, and by terrible, let me make this a little more concrete. You've got code reviewers, you've got code reviews, and one of the people on the team gives feedback in a blunt and rude and slightly insulting way. So they're talking about the code, but the way they talk about the code is implying that the person who wrote it is bad, right? If, as the leader, you let this happen, what you're saying is that that's an acceptable way to talk to each other. And it can be so uncomfortable to call someone on this, especially if, in the case of a developer, you have somebody who's kind of not great about, like, they don't get people. But that's part of your job, is to set that tone and have those hard conversations. So to that end, number 3, communicating with clarity. Hey, Minnesota, we have to talk. Part of the culture here is that we are not always very direct with each other. And I'm from Chicago, actually. I did not grow up here. So I came in and kind of have like approached this whole thing as an anthropologist, because I had to like learn how y'all communicate. It was very complicated. And there's no judgments here. I'm not doing that. There's a whole set of rules. But the problem is that the rules of polite Minnesota society, and just sometimes the what's more comfortable, is to not be direct and not say the thing that needs to be said. So when we communicate with clarity, what we need to do is figure out the most important things that you need this person to know, and what do you need from them, or what do you need them to do. We want to sidestep implying what you need someone to know. We want to take out the idea that the tone will communicate more than our words are communicating. Don't get me wrong, tone is exceptionally important, but we want to try to get rid of weasel words. That's things like just, maybe, I was thinking, it would be better if. Communicate kindly. Absolutely think about the feelings of the person you're talking to, but don't avoid saying the thing that you need. This leads to a next point, which is having difficult conversations. The longer you put that off, the worse it will be for everybody. And I want to make sure this is really clear. So I wrote it in bigger font. The longer you put off difficult conversations, the worse it will be for everybody. What I mean by that is, if you need to give an employee feedback, which is not the best part of the job every time, but a essential part of the job, you have to do it quickly, you have to do it directly, and you, most importantly, is to do it as close to the thing that happened as you can. And here's why. If you do it really quick, if you do it right away, you're just like, oh, hey, I saw that you did, you used, this particular way of solving the problem. We don't want you to do that. Can you do this instead? That was pretty neutral. Even if what I had to say was, oh, that's really bad the way you wrote this, but let's just talk about it, right? A little bit meaner, but like still relatively like, okay, that's just constructive criticism. I can work with that. The longer you put something off, the harder that conversation is, because the person is going to sit there as you're telling them and think, how come no one told me this? Which is an awful feeling. Awful. The sooner we have these hard conversations, the better it will be. And we avoid them as humans. Humans avoid these conversations because we think it'll be uncomfortable. And the best thing that I can say to you is, it will be more uncomfortable the longer you wait. So it's imperative to put it out there. And specifically in the context of management, if the first time someone hears about something they did wrong is in their performance review, you have absolutely failed as a manager. That just has to be a mantra that you tell yourself, to the degree that sometimes when I'm putting together performance reviews and I realize I'm about to accidentally do that because I've been thinking about it and I've come up with this feedback and I'm like, oh my gosh, this really is a thing I need to say. I don't want to like surprise them with it in the review. I'm going to bring that up in a one-on-one before the review. I literally want nothing in that review to be surprised. I want everything in there to be old news, pulled together nicely so that they can see the whole picture. But I don't want any portion of that picture to be surprise to them. So that was 20 minutes. There's a lot more content. I'm going to stop here. There are, like I said, there are 3 skills: empathy, direct communication, and setting expectations. You can email me or tweet me, and I will look at the questions as well. Thank you so much.